Good evening.
Hello.
How are you? Everybody's good? I'm good too, thanks for asking. I'm Christa Wessel, and I am the midday host now at All Classical Portland. I was on early mornings for a really long time, and then my colleague, Robert McBride, is retiring after 17 years. Can you believe that? I know. So they moved me into his midday show. Robert will be continuing to do pre-concert talks through the end of the season. And he's got 2 more episodes of Club Mod to go. One tonight, and then next week is a live 2-hour episode of Club Mod. And then he's off the airwaves at All Classical. And we may all just cry ourselves to sleep that night. It's going to be hard. Anyway, thank you for being here. Robert will continue to do these chats, so keep showing up the rest of the season. I'm Christa Wessel. This is the Associate Conductor of the Oregon Symphony. His name is Norman Huynh.
Hello. You get to, now you can sleep in, right?
I know, it's so great. I had 2 years doing the early morning, and that was plenty. Now, sleeping in midday is great, yes. So I don't even know exactly where to start with you. We did a pre-concert talk, you and I, a little more than a year ago, which was your first season with the Oregon Symphony.
Yeah, I guess it was way back in...
Like November 2016.
Yeah, October, November.
Yeah. So you've been busy since then. I follow you on social media, and I know that you were in Thailand recently. What were you doing there?
I go to Thailand every year. Well, this was my fourth year going. I work with this youth orchestra called the Princess Galleani Wattana Youth Orchestra. I believe it took me 4 years to be able to say that correctly. And every year they have their one concert they do it at the School of Music, but this one concert that they bring me for is at the Thai Cultural Center. And one of the princesses, Her Royal Highness Swamswali, presides over the concert. So it's always this huge royal affair, and there's always these these procedures that I've had to do 4 times now of you basically, there's an empty, the royal chair of the hall, and you go and practice bowing, and then you step in front of her and you receive the flowers, and then you have to back up, bow again before you can turn your back. And then it happens, there's a lot of bowing. So when in doubt, you just bow. So yeah, I've done that for 4 years now, and it's a lot of fun. I get my fix of good mango and coconuts.
How did you land a job in Thailand?
I applied for this call for young conductors back in 2014, I think, and yeah, they sent me an email, and I said, sure, I'd love to come.
How often do you go then?
Every January so far.
Got it. Wow.
We'll see about next year.
Okay. And since we did these pre-concert talks, you have also had the occasion to step in and come to the rescue, which is sort of the role of an associate conductor, sort of, right?
Right. Well, that is my I would say my main job, other than conducting my assignments, the youth concerts, the family concerts. A big portion of my job is usually covering the classics, just in case Carlos or a guest conductor falls ill or something. I have to sort of be ready at moment's notice.
So you come to every single rehearsal just in case?
Yes.
Got it.
And concert and everything.
Right.
My tux is always in my car. And,
oh, really?
Yep.
Are you kidding?
Most of the time.
That's great. So you were actually called upon to step in the last minute
in September. Actually, I think it was the Saturday night, if you were there. It was for the opening with Augustin Hadelich with the Beethoven Violin Concerto and Morton Gould piece and Islamé. It wasn't a very standard program to step in on.
And so you didn't even have the benefit of rehearsals? You just stepped into the concert?
Nope, I found out an hour early. So
dang.
6:30 is when I got the phone call. It said, Norman, you're on tonight.
And then what do you do? Look in the mirrors? I can do this.
Well, when you get that phone call, your adrenaline just immediately, and the first thing I thought was oh my God, where are my tails? I don't, so I went scrounging around, and then I just sort of left my apartment immediately so I could free myself of all distractions, because our homes are filled with everything, and just locked myself in the dressing room and made sure, flipped through everything, and I met with Augustine and said, hey, what are you doing here? Can you just remind me what you're doing here? Can we just do it together really quick? Okay. And you go out.
And it was just that one night? Or
that one night. And then
was
Carlos
back?
felt better. Yeah, it was just food poisoning, so.
Wow. Wow.
I cooked him dinner the night before. So.
I see how it is.
Just kidding, Carlos, if you're listening.
Tonight's program is different, though. Mm-hmm. You planned this. You've been given this subscription concert to program and to plan. You've been working on it.
Yes. So I've known about this one since February of last year. So I've spent about close to a year, at least, with the Sibelius and just sort of thinking about it and listening to a lot of different recordings and just big picture thinking. So it's exciting because now it's my chance to work with the orchestra and have the amount of time to shape of piece and not have to come in sort of right away and just hope that everything fits together, doesn't fall apart.
You have some control, or at least some semblance of control, because do you all know what happened this week? Our soloist, Francesco Piemontesi, who's on the cover of your program, called in sick earlier this week. So then, what do? You
have to scrounge and hope that it doesn't fall. No, I'm just kidding. I got the phone call from Charles, our VP of Artistic, planning, and he said, Norman, we've got an emergency. And I thought, oh my God, Francesco's sick. I just know it. And so he fell ill, and he said, okay, our first priority was, what are we going to do? Because no one can do both the Strauss Burlesque and the Franck on a moment's notice.
What he was planning to do is pretty specialized.
Right, exactly. So we thought, okay, what would pair well with the program? Maybe it could be Ravel, it could be Beethoven, and then finally we thought, okay, the easiest and most substantial piece that would work are Beethoven piano concertos, because it wouldn't be trumped by the Barber before, and it also wouldn't overshadow the Sibelius in the second half. There's a lot of different kind of wheel. I was thinking, well, what about Strauss Don Juan? And I'm just kidding. That would be really, the orchestra would be, So you had to figure out, okay, what's a concerto that the orchestra could read really well the first time and be able to put it together.
Yeah, because it's not only a big change for you. You've been planning this program for a year, but for them too. They've been rehearsing their parts, and suddenly they got to throw that out.
Right, and the third piano concerto, which is what you will hear tonight, is the only one I have not studied of the five. So I was thinking, oh my gosh, all right, so crap. I mean, I know it. I've heard it a lot, and I have, I sort of grew up in college listening to the Bernstein and Zimmerman Vienna Phil video recording, which is amazing. And so I just, okay, here we go. I sort of thrive in those situations where I'm kind of put under pressure. That's just the kind of person that I am. If I have too much time, then it's, it's like,
second guessing yourself.
Yeah, but here it's like, all right, boom, we've got to do this. Here's what I've got to do to make it right. And
so what I'm hearing you're saying is that this soloist, Francesco Piemontesi, who was going to do these two remarkable works when he called in sick, the first thing that you did is actually not seek out a new soloist, but seek out repertoire.
Then, once we had the repertoire set, we said, okay, either Beethoven 1 or Beethoven 3. Now, Charles goes and he contacts all the agents, managers that he knows. He calls them, gets on, hey, do you have anyone who's free this weekend? Or on Thursday or Friday, that can play either Beethoven 3 or Beethoven 1. And luckily, we found an amazing pianist in Barry Douglas. And he was, Charles updated me. He said, well, we might have Barry, but he's asleep now because he's in Ireland. So we have to wait till he wakes up in the morning time before we can officially confirm. So we found out officially Wednesday morning that, and he hopped on a plane on Thursday and took it was 3 different stops and arrived here in PDX.
And you guys then had your first opportunity to rehearse the Beethoven
Yesterday morning.
Yesterday morning?
Yes.
Holy smokes.
Yeah, so we had to shift the rehearsal around it's just all of this, putting together the puzzles. pieces.
And you guys had a concert in Newburgh
Last night.
So you had your first rehearsal with Barry in the new repertoire yesterday morning. Ran out to do a concert in Newburgh last night. And how did that go?
It went well. It was great. Yeah. It was fun. I mean, there's some growing pains with doing a Beethoven piano concerto in 2 days for the first time. But it went really well, and I think there were some really great moments. And tonight, I think it's going to be spectacular.
Can I ask you this? I'm still stuck on this idea of when somebody cancels, rather than finding a replacement performer, you found a replacement piece of music and then found somebody to perform that piece of music. Is that how seasons are put together generally? Like when this concert was assigned to you and you chose Sibelius' Fifth Symphony and this Barber essay, did you then choose these two pieces of music and then find somebody to perform them in Francesco Piemontesi?
Well, Francesco originally was supposed to do Ravel, I think G major concerto, and then came back and said, never mind, I want to do the Strauss Burlesque and the Franck. So what happens is usually we'll seek out a soloist that we want to bring here, and they say, here's my rep list that I'm going to be performing this season. We'll pick one, and then we'll sort of build the program around that. Now sometimes we'll say, okay, the orchestra really wants to do Shostakovich's Fifth Symphony. Now, then we bring a soloist in to sort of complement that program. So it works. And Charles is a genius in putting together an entire season. He thinks about so many different things that.
So it's a big dance, soloist and repertoire, constantly shifting. It almost sounds like. My goodness. I'm eager to see this Beethoven Piano Concerto No. 3 with Barry Douglas. And are you feeling at home with it now? I mean, I imagine that once you found out this change was made, you locked yourself in a room and didn't talk to anybody. And
I did, yep. And I mean, we rescheduled our meeting like 4 times. I think I kept telling Chris, I'm so sorry, I can't do today, I can't do tomorrow, I can't do it, because everything just kept changing. So yeah, I kind of did that. And I did that sort of in the last 2 weeks of my life. I've just closed the door on everything and tried to just really focus on
let's
Sibelius.
Talk about, because I follow you on social media, I saw that when literally you went to lock yourself away for score study for the Sibelius, you went to some place that kind of approximates Finland, right?
Yeah.
What's the story there?
Okay, so I wanted to my original idea was to go to Finland and Ainola and outside of, and see Helsinki and stuff, but I couldn't do that. But so what I did is I looked and tried to find a cabin out in the middle of nowhere that would have snow. And most of them were all booked in the Pacific Northwest, and you don't know if you'll have snow or not. So then I just started going farther and farther north, and eventually found this place out in Lac La Hache up in British Columbia.
Wow.
About 10.5 hours north. So it's like 3 hours past Whistler if you're going through that scenic highway, which I did take, which is so beautiful. And it was this cabin that was perched on a lake. They had 3 feet of snow 3 days before, and the lake was completely frozen over, and you couldn't see, it was on a ranch, but you couldn't see anybody because there were trees everywhere. And so it was the perfect landscape to really put myself into just to get a small glimpse of the surroundings that Sibelius lived through, because I think his music depicts, I mean, you can sort of just hear the Finnish landscape when you're listening to it.
So when we were talking about designing programs, this was important to you to program Sibelius' Symphony No. 5, right? This is your choice. You really look forward to it. It's been, investigating this piece. It's a heartfelt work for you. Why? And why go to a cabin and hunker down and just kind of...
Well, since I sort of came across Sibelius for the first time in grad school, so like 7 years ago, and I just got hooked on his music. And when Charles and I were thinking, oh, Norman, what do you want to do? And I just thought, can we do Sibelius 2 or 5? And after we got Francesco's rep, we said, okay, 5 would be the perfect piece. And for me, I don't know, it's just the way the first movement develops and evolves, basically starts from nothing and then evolves into something that's so thrilling and exciting. I mean, it's sort of one of those pieces that every conductor just loves to conduct all the time. And of course, the swan theme in the last movement, there's just no, it's so full of power and emotion and colors that you don't get in any other composer. I mean, you listen to Sibelius and you know that this is Sibelius.
You mentioned the swan theme, and you also mentioned that Sibelius and nature are kind of inextricable. Can you explain the swan thing?
Yes. So actually, I'm really bad at memorizing quotes from letters and stuff, so I have to just pull out what I wrote down.
Look at the score here.
Yes. So basically, he wrote a letter. This was just after he wrote his Fourth Symphony. He said he wrote a letter to a friend, April 1915. Today at 10 to 11, I saw 16 swans, one of my greatest experiences. Lord God, what beauty. And so when you hear the bum, beam, bum, beam, bum, obviously swans don't sound like that. Right.
But that's his takeaway.
But that was sort of his takeaway. That was his motivation to say, oh, I know what I want to do now. Now I'm going to start sketching my Fifth Symphony. And so 10 to 11 every day while I was up in British Columbia, I tried to look for some swans, but they weren't up there.
Now that swan theme is one of the most lush, it's full of grandeur. This with the horns playing this thing in the final, probably in the last 5 minutes of the last movement, right? But I also recognize that Sebelius kind of prepares us for that moment in creative ways all throughout that symphony.
Yes. So if you, the piece originally was 4 movements long. So he started composing in 1915, and the Helsinki Philharmonic, with Sibelius conducted it for his 50th birthday, and they had declared that day National Sibelius Day. Well, the reviews were okay. Some people liked it, some people didn't, and he wasn't very satisfied with it. So he revised it again, and then didn't quite like it, and finally he put it off because of financial issues, and then also there was the Russia, they declared independence from Russia, and then Russia came to invade, and he had to flee his home, and so it got put off for a while. And one of his best friends actually kept writing, said, Jean, finish your Fifth Symphony. I think you have something great, because he was really struggling with trying to make this symphony right, because Sibelius was in a weird time in music history. He was sort of stuck right in between the Romanticism era and then the Second Viennese School with Schoenberg. So to give you an idea, pieces that were composed right before his Fifth Symphony were Stravinsky's Rite of Spring, Petrushka, Schoenberg's pieces for orchestra. So a lot of people were saying, he felt pressured to have his own to be a modern composer. He wanted to be seen as a modern composer and not someone stuck in the past. And his Fourth Symphony is a reflection of him trying to be modern, but it didn't really quite fit with him. So what he did is he wanted to push the genre forward in a way that didn't really quite mess with harmony, right? So the lack of tonality that the Second Viennese School was so for. He wanted to move the genre with form and symphonic form. So the normal symphony being a 4-movement, first movement being sonata form, second, you have fast, slow, sort of minuet, trio, and then fast rondo, 4th movement. What he wanted to do is have this idea, this motive, and create something that can be eventually played through and involved all the way to the end, and build and have that kind of formal structure. So in this piece, you don't you can't quite listen to it like you can a Beethoven symphony or a Haydn symphony. There are hints, there's a lot of, I'm just getting a little bit too detailed, but there's a lot of the scholar literature out there about what is the form of Sibelius's Fifth Symphony? What is the form of the first movement? It's not sonata form. Some people say it's sonata form because it has an A section and there's a B section and then there's kind of a development and then it comes back. What? But there's another Hepopsky. I'm really bad at saying his name, but he's a Sibelius scholar, and he thinks that his music is rotational form. So what happens is there are multiple rotations of ideas that are happening. So if you listen to the very opening, you get da-dum-ding, ba-dum-ding, bum-bum-bum-bum, bum-bim-bim-bum, and then you have the B section, which is ding-dom-dom-dee-dom. It's a little more drama. So when you listen to it, think about all this stuff. All right, those two A-B sections. And then what happens is he takes that A-B section and he basically repeats it. It's kind of like a very large theme and variation, right? So he has the A-B section, then he varies it a little bit, but you can still hear the seed that he planted at the beginning. And then finally, what he does is that you can't really hear it unless you have the score and you say, that's what this from. It took me a while to say, wow, this all fits together. Oh my God! When I found that out, my mind was just like, whoa. But everything ties to. He thought of every single rhythm at the very end. The stringers are going, it's so exciting. You don't know what they're playing, but it's actually the exact same thing as. Da-da-dum, 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 ba-da-dum.
Just sped up.
It's just sped up and put in a different way. So the symphony has that sort of aesthetic to it. The second movement, same thing. But the swan theme, now we're coming back. Sorry, I kind of went off on a little trail here. But the swan theme, so the purpose of the first movement is that he had this first movement. He had the two movements and he condensed them into one movement. So you'll hear it when the second movement starts. Once it starts having this bum, 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 bim, da 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 dun, dun, that's the original second movement. All right? You know that you're in the second movement. The original second movement. The now new second movement that we'll be performing tonight. The purpose of this movement is that what he does, the reason why the swan theme is so satisfying to listen to, where you think, oh my gosh, finally,
everything's come together.
Everything has come together, oh my gosh, is because he takes that dum 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 ding dum bum bing bum, and he hides them. So in the second movement, you hear them in the background. You actually don't notice it at all. Even though I know that it's there, it's still
hard. Subconscious thing.
It's very subconscious, right? So he puts, the purpose of the second movement is to subconsciously get you ready for the final movement.
The big payoff.
The huge payoff, exactly. And this scholar calls it the telos. So it's his, and most people think that the symphony goes to that swan theme, right? The pom, beam, pom, and then finally with this huge key change, and it's even more beautiful and lush. But the true sort of climax of the piece is the very ending, where harmonically, because what happens throughout the entire piece from the very beginning, in E flat major, but it's not quite. It's E flat major, but it sort of circles around. You never get a bum 5-1 cadence at all. It's not there. It's rarely, you think it's gonna go, and all of a sudden it's like a 2-chord in B major, which is not even, it's not, B major is not even in the scale of E flat, right? But you think it's a cadence. So what happens is that finally at the very end of the symphony, the grand telos that he is talking about is, you'll see me, I'll give a very huge gesture, you'll know when it happens, is that you get finally E flat major, boom, boom, and to round it off, he gives a plagal cadence, which basically it's the church chord. You know, 1, 4, 1, and then he goes 5. Silence, silence, silence. 5, 5, 5, and then boom, boom, and that's it. So it's like, okay, but it's right, exactly. And there's actually there's a really funny story. I'm going to tell this story tonight, but you can laugh harder the second time to encourage it. But Jason Schooler, actually, if you got the email, if you might have read this note from him. He's one of our bassists. He said there's a great story because at the end of the symphony there are these it ends, it builds, and all of a sudden it's boom, chord, silence, and there are 6 of them, boom. And what happened is the orchestra played to the big chord, boom, and an audience member, not knowing that there are 6 more, goes, bravo, chum, sorry. And so it's like, and of course they finished it, but imagine if he said encore, right? Encore, chum, another chord, bravo, chum. So I tell you that so you don't yell bravo and save yourself a little bit of embarrassment. But by all means, after the first movement, you can hoop and holler because there's nothing that I want to do more than when I hear the end of the first movement, just, yes, that was awesome. Yeah, so it's okay to clap.
So you don't mind if people clap between movements?
Of course not, no. I mean, they did, I think it was when that tradition came in, I think in London when it was performed for the Queen or royalty, and they got upset that people were, disrupting. Mm-hmm. I mean, they did it all the time, and then they would. So if you actually, what happened is people in Beethoven's day would applaud after the first movement, and he would do the first movement again, right? So right. Maybe we do the first movement again if you applaud that enough.
Can you believe we are out of time? We didn't even get to Samuel Barber.
Oh, sorry. But I'll tell you that very quickly is the Barber is, it's great. It came from a time of war, so it's very triumphant, but there is this small bit of anxiety that is underneath. And I think what happens is that you get the Beethoven, which is it's so full of material, and finally this big relief and triumphant ending in the Sibelius. We hope you enjoy it. Thank you so much for coming out.
Norman Huynh.
Sorry, that's great.